Breaking news.
Breaking news.
We begin with breaking news. A house fire in Englewood ends in several deaths.
Hello and welcome to a special episode of Chicago This Week. I'm VIctoria Olaleye.
And I'm Morgan Hawes. Today we'll be taking a deeper look into the war with Iran, but we begin with breaking news. According to government-aligned media, this morning, Tehran suspends talks with the U.S. to protest Israel's expanding military offensive in Lebanon. This comes after the U.S. and Iran exchanged strikes over this past weekend. An Iranian-aligned news agency added that the Iranian government is considering a full closure into the Strait of Hormuz. Iran did not comment officially, and U.S. officials did not immediately respond to comment either.
Staying overseas, even as Iran is considering a full closure, it has established operational control over the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global resource causing severe economic impacts. Here to give us a little more information on the importance of the strait is our reporter, Morgan Norris. Morgan?
Yeah, Victoria, the Strait of Hormuz is the world's most critical oil and gas choke point, and it's the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. It's a global energy lifeline and a primary export route for Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran itself. So any blockades like what's happening right now causes immediate supply shortages and sends global fuel prices soaring. Beyond that, it's vital for the trade of natural gas and fertilizer, making it essential for global food security. And there are no practical alternatives to the strait, no viable detours, so all ships entering or leaving must pass through this narrow 21-mile gap, meaning nations across the globe, specifically in the United States, are experiencing major consequences. Victoria?
Thanks, Morgan. Besides trade, the United States and Iran has had a tense history that ranges several decades, from oil, international policy, to Western intervention. I spoke to an award-winning Iranian filmmaker and assistant professor at Northwestern University for some more insight. As people walk the streets of the United States, the impact of conflict thousands of miles away is hitting home. Things like higher gas prices, groceries, and flight costs are tied to growing tensions with Iran. But this moment is tied to a history that goes back generations.
The biggest turning point was probably the hostage crisis when 66 Americans, including diplomats and other personnel, were taken hostage in a U.S. embassy in Iran. That was the beginning of sort of a pattern in the behavior of the Islamic regime.
That crisis marked a turning point in how the regime handled conflict. She says many Iranian activists who oppose the government later faced imprisonment, torture, or execution. She adds that one natural resource has long been a driving force behind conflict in the region.
Oil definitely has been the center of many ups and downs of the history in Iran.
That dynamic is also shaping current policy, including efforts to expand the Abraham Accords.
One of the goals that Trump is, probably following and constantly talk about is bringing more Gulf countries to the Abraham Accords. Some of the countries such as, UAE and Bahrain have already accepted the Abraham Accords, but while others like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Kuwait were not willing to join.
She says that the regime has fueled divisions across Gulf countries, a dynamic she believes may align with broader U.S. goals.
The regime turned the whole Gulf countries against themselves. And that might be one of the objectives of the U.S. intervention.
One Champaign-Urbana activist shares her perspective on U.S. intervention in the Southwest Asia and North Africa region.
When it comes to U.S. policy, or even just Western policy in general in that area, the word that comes to me is meddling. You see a repetitive meddling in the affairs in the area.
She says U.S. intervention in the region is often tied to cooperation with its own interests.
The U.S. has been militarily present in many countries, many of the Arab and Gulf countries for a very long time. but then also on levels that are a little less visible when it comes to things like aid being conditional on their support of different U.S. policies, their support of U.S. bases on their sovereign land.
Despite her concerns, she shares her hopes for the future of the region.
People want self-determination, and people are capable of self-determination. And this idea that they need foreign intervention and they need foreign influence to have their own self-determination is incredibly condescending.
Iran and the United States have had a strained relationship when it comes to international policy. While the United States says peace talks with Iran are still ongoing, both nations have continued to trade strikes, threatening the ceasefire and potential agreement to end the war. And these constant back and forth negotiations have caused both confusion and frustration among the American people. I talked to some experts and activists in the Chicago area to learn more. After weeks of fighting amid peace talks, President Donald Trump is reportedly considering a tentative agreement with Iran, saying that he'll only accept a deal that is good for the American people. But political science and international policy experts argue that he started a war he can't get out of.
Well, I think the administration's really struggling to figure out where the deal is going to come from. They dismissed the agreement that was in place since 2015. This was the Obama agreement. But they understood that because the deal was gone, Iran was building up the nuclear capacity again.
Politically, it's really a dangerous position to be in, but also because there aren't any real good off-ramps here. This almost changes minute by minute, but it does seem like they're getting closer to an agreement on something that will sort of begin the process of negotiations. But that's really only getting us to the starting line. That's getting us to where we were before the conflict began.
And these experts say that Iran has the leverage.
Iran, by seizing control of the Strait of Hormuz, has basically put a stranglehold on the global economy. Economically, the United States is in a very, very poor position,
making this war a leading cause to a steady decline in President Trump's approval ratings, even with his supporters.
Trump supporters who have a long history of certain policy positions have been willing to set those aside, but in this issue they seem to have drawn the line. President Trump promised no more forever wars, and so that's why it's so difficult now for the administration to get out of this, because they can't get the agreement that they want.
And in Chicago, many have voiced their disapproval.
From the Trump perspective, it's all about telling people we're winning, we're in control, we're the strongest force in the world, but what hopefully more people are seeing is how destructive this administration and U.S. foreign policy in general has been.
This war was not an American war. It was not. It was a war of choice of few people in the cabinet, right? This administration, and also it doesn't secure any of national interest of American.
Ali Taro is an Iranian refugee and former Iranian political prisoner. He says his main focus is to advocate for the safety of Iranians.
I'm always looking for how we can get rid of this regime, how we can make changes, right? So it matters, how many people, how many lives we can save.
He worries for the safety of his family, adding that they shouldn't have to die for such an unnecessary war.
I have so many friends, family that are still in Iran. Okay, their lives matters to me. I don't want them, I don't want them to be killed for nothing. Technically, there is no solution for Americans, for President Trump. He just needs to say, okay, we are giving up. Let's sign a peace.
We have so many problems with democracy here in the U.S. that we certainly shouldn't be spreading it elsewhere, and spending more and more on weapons. It does affect our communities here.
But despite this war's unpopularity, experts say the conflicting demands between Iran and the U.S. means that the end is likely out of reach.
I mean, again, this is a major, major political problem that they don't really have a good answer for unless there's, some way where he pulls off an amazing victory in the next couple of days, which I think is unlikely.
As I mentioned, because of this drawn-out peace deal, many Americans have voiced their disapproval for not only the war, but the Trump administration itself. Here with a look into this pivot on public support is Emilio Reyes. Emilio?
Yes, Morgan, you're absolutely correct. And according to The Hill, recent polls show that President Trump's approval ratings have hit a record low across both of his terms in office. Before the war, President Trump's approval ratings hovered at around 40%. But now, almost 4 months into the war, they sit at about 34%. And among Republicans, his net approval is at 61%, which is down 30 points since January 2025. Experts suggest that a reason for this ties into Trump's previous campaigns, where he advocated against endless wars overseas. But now, the war in Iran is still ongoing, with no end date in sight. Morgan?